The FNCS Last Chance Finals are officially over. We had our final 3 duos book their spots for Globals. We had the surprise team win in quite an impressive fashion. But before I talk about any of that, we of course have to discuss MrSavage and Trooly. Now, if you haven't noticed, I am at a temporary setup right now, but my PC does seem to be working. The same couldn't be said though for MrSavage. He was plagued by issues. He was playing from a setup at the Red Bull LAN in Austria, and he did have a bunch of problems. His audio was very quiet. He said he could barely hear during some of the matches. In game 2 he actually had no audio altogether, and he was having to communicate with Trooly via Discord on his mobile, so pretty far from ideal. Despite that though, this duo were incredibly impressive, and they were so close to qualifying for Globals. They finished in 7th place overall, only 7 points off Globals qualification, which is just insane. I mean, when you consider the fact that there were 16 Globals qualified duos in this lobby and there were only 3 available spots, the fact that Savage finished in 7th and still didn't get a spot is absolutely wild. I mean, a lot of people were thinking that you could finish top 12, maybe even top 15 and still snag a global spot. So I think Savage and Trooly can feel pretty hard done by. They played excellently, they did their part, but ultimately it just wasn't quite enough. There were of course moments that did change the course of their event. Of course I mentioned game 2 already, but in that final match they did take height. They were looking like they were going to go for the win, but then Mumsy did shockwave up and take out MrSavage. So ultimately, had they been able to win that game, they would have qualified for Globals. They still managed a 3rd place in game 6, so impressive by all means. It just wasn't quite enough in the end. But listen, I don't think we can really criticise Savage and Trooly. I think they did everything they could. They played excellently. This is by far the best performance we've seen from them as a duo, and it's more a comment on the fact that all the Globals teams underperformed that has led to Savage and Trooly not going to Globals, if I'm honest with you. And we'll get into discussing those Globals teams in just a second, but credit to Savage and Trooly. They may not have got the LAN qual this time, but they were incredibly close, and I think they can be very proud of how they played. Now, let's discuss the 3 duos that did secure passage to the LAN in Antwerp, the first of which being Mumsy and Sato. Now, I have to say, all 3 of the duos that qualified played exceptionally well. They finished in 3rd, 4th and 5th, but Mumsy and Sato were the pick of the bunch. They were landing at a fairly unassuming split on the map, but they really made things work for them. They are an incredible fighting duo, as we already know. Mumsy and Sato, 2 players, very good and creative. They have great firepower as well, and I'm very happy to see some French representation at the LAN. They did excellently in the final game to secure passage, and yeah, I think they'll represent EU well. Let's just say that. I'm happy we've got some French representation, and as you're about to see in a minute, and not the only French duo that qualified. Hutty and Fishix have also secured their spot at Globals. Now, they actually won game 1. They had a lightning start to the tournament. After 3 matches, they were in 1st place with 205 points, which is pretty staggering, to be honest. They did all of this from uncontested wonky land. They really made this spot work for them. There's not been many times where they've been uncontested and where they've been able to play optimally, but when they were given the chance in this tournament, they really took advantage of it. Things did get a little bit ropey towards the end of the tournament. They died very early in game 6, but ultimately they were able to hang on thanks to their excellent start to the tournament. And listen, it is going to be good to see these guys at the LAN. They are super underrated. I do feel like they've come a long way from losing 6-0 off spawn to Shark and Teeny. They've very much matured as a duo. Fishix especially is a player that has a huge future ahead of him, especially he will be someone that will do well in the FNCS solos event. We know he's a great solo player, and frankly his fighting ability is super underrated. Hutty, of course, making a LAN again, having qualified for Globals in 2024, so I think this duo could be one to watch out for. Definitely don't underestimate them. Now, the final team that qualified is another French duo. It was the team that I said were a lock to qualify, and that is of course Izzy and Nosif. And I don't think many people will be surprised by this. They were kind of up and down throughout the tournament, but ultimately they had enough consistency to get over the line. Now, they also went down very early in game 6, and they nearly allowed Savage and Trooly to qualify, but ultimately Izzy and Nosif were able to hang on. Now, this is the 2nd consecutive LAN for this duo. They did of course make the Summit LAN back in May, so I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, these guys have kind of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but they've definitely had a breakout year in 2026, and I'm very excited to see how they can do at their 2nd ever LAN. Of course, they've had their practice at the first one. That was their opportunity to get acclimatized to the environment, and now they can approach this LAN with a new sense of confidence, a new sense of maturity, and I do think they're going to do very well. So all 3 of these duos that EU are sending to Globals, I'm very happy with. I think they're at a very high quality, and I do think they can shake up that lobby, let's just say. Now listen, this event wasn't all about making globals. Coming first did still matter, and Chap and Flickzy were the duo that won, and I have to say I was incredibly impressed with their performance. Finally, we have a win from these guys. We expected them to be one of the strongest duos going into Chapter 7. Things didn't really pan out that way. 0 Divisional Cup wins, 2 underperformances in the FNCS Grands, especially the disappointment in Major 1 when they had the Mountain Split uncontested. But they did qualify for globals at the Summit LAN, and they were full value for the win here. So we are seeing them turn up at moments, and I have to say I was really impressed by what I saw. Chap in particular was on fire. He was first for eliminations, first for damage ratio, second for solo clutch points. I mean, yes, he's had a slow year, but this was Chap playing at his very best. We've seen him have his primes alongside Teeny, playing really well alongside Savage and Reason, and again, yesterday just felt like Chap at his very best. It was genuinely a joy to watch, and if he can continue this form into globals, then who knows how well these guys can do. I mean, hopefully this can be their chance to build on this, to actually establish themselves as a top duo once again, because I've always felt like they've had potential. They've not really lived up to it, but maybe this can be the start of something big for Chap and Flickzy. I was also very impressed with the next 2 duos. We had Vico and Malibuca in second place. An excellent mentality shown here to come back after only managing 20th place in the FNCS Grand Finals. Vico has locked in after admitting that he kind of took his foot off the gas after their Summit LAN victory, and it definitely seems like things were back to their best. They seemed a bit more happy. They seemed like they were on the same page once again, and this was genuinely a huge performance. They actually had a very bad game 1, but they showed great mental strength to persevere, to persist through that. They were able to win the final game to shoot up into second place, not a million miles off Chap and Flickzy as well. So what a comeback, genuinely, from these guys. I didn't think they'd do this well, but they put the disappointment of Grand Finals past them just in time for globals, and I think we can start feeling positive about these guys again. I think they've turned the tide, and this is even more impressive when we factor in the South Zone bias during these Grand Finals. Vico and Malibuca, of course, land right at the north of the map over at Lifty Lodge, so they were able to make things work for them. Fair play to them. Hottie and Fishix actually deserve credit as well, because they, of course, landed at the north too, and they were able to persevere through the adverse zones. So very, very impressive from those duos. We had IDrop and Ghonzo in third place, and this was another great effort after 7th place in Grands. They are proving that when you give them the bus split uncontested, when you give them the mythic pistol, they will always perform, and it's been a really impressive rise over the past month. I did criticise Ghonzo and Twek for splitting soon after their Divisional Cup win, but at least for Ghonzo it has really worked out in his favour. He's looking brilliant with IDrop, and I do think this is going to be a very underrated duo in globals, should they be able to secure a decent spot on the map. Now, it's time to talk about some of the tier 1 duos that did slightly underperform, and we have a bit of a block of them. We had 6 in a row. We had Cammy and Hari in 8th, Shark and Teeny in 9th, Swizzy and Pixie in 10th, Focus and Thomas in 11th, Sky and Scroll in 12th place, and Chino and Pablo in 13th. Now listen, all 6 of these teams had uncomp wise very favourable situations, but none of them could really make it count. Sky and Scroll in 12th is, of course, the one that really sticks out, because they won FNCS Grand Finals only a few weeks ago in an absolute dominant fashion, and everyone expected them to fully just continue that here, given that it's the exact same meta, given that they could just ride out the momentum, but it just didn't really go down that way. It wasn't even an issue with their mid games or their drop spots either. They were getting into the end game, they just weren't getting deep. They only had 1 match inside the top 10, so ultimately that is an issue that we saw at the start of the season when they were struggling in some of the divisional cups. They just weren't making it too deep in some of those matches, and it did feel like that problem kind of presented itself once again. So hopefully Sky and Scroll can get back to their best ahead of globals, but I wouldn't read into this too much. A lot of other big duos struggled, and they did just win FNCS in absolutely dominant fashion. So let's not get too worried about Sky and Scroll just yet. Now let's take a look down the rest of the leaderboard. In 14th place we've got Pix and Firen. The Polish duo have already secured their spot at globals, but I do want to give special credit to Pix because he had the most solo clutch points out of any player in the entire lobby. We had Seke and Ari in 15th, definitely a duo that I did not expect to finish that high up. Dinas and Franek in 16th. We had Nebs and Nathan in 17th. Definitely a bit of a disappointing day for the UK teams. We had Velo and Zynox in 24th, King Cringe and Twy in 26th. So I did expect some of those UK duos to break into the top 10. Didn't quite happen on this occasion. Dom and Dimash also struggled, finishing in 18th. Honestly, I don't really think this is much of a surprise. They're yet to have a good placement this season. They very much struggled in their heats, only qualifying on about 130 something points in 15th place. Grands wasn't great either. They've been conned in a lot of div cups, but when they were uncon, they didn't perform. So ultimately, I think it could be a case of a new meta, a new map potentially benefiting Dom and Dimash, because right now we're not seeing the performances, but I do hope they turn it around, because on their day they are one of the best duos on the region. In terms of other big names, I've kind of gone over most of them. Akira and Podesai can no longer make LAN. Reason and Khan also didn't make it, and they have now split as a duo, so Reason is looking for a new teammate. We also won't be seeing Cringe and Volko at LAN. It's the same story with Vidil and Pradaj. Both of those teams had a tough tournament. Seti and Yapko though were the team that struggled more than any, because they got 6-0'd off spawn by Church and Finchik. So the dream of Seti making LAN, having missed out on the summit, I'm afraid it is over. Back-to-back LANs that he has missed out on. And over on NA Central, I'm afraid we didn't have any European duos secure extra spots. Both Moneymaker and Fanayan and Queasy and Victor V did ultimately struggle. So at the end of the day, we have 22 European duos being represented at the LAN. That's 21 that qualified on EU, plus Howley and Lucia, who of course won Middle East Grands. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of content. I do keep you guys up to date on European Fortnite as best as I can. Thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.